is recognized by the Government of India and supported by Startup India. TechBairn offers a new opportunity to enthusiastic students to learn new techniques and make them industry ready. I'm happy to welcome our guest and speaker, Mr. Rishav Pandey. He is working as a full stack web developer at Skuad. This webinar on full stack web development will be fun and full of learning. Now I will request Mr. Rishav to take over and proceed with the webinar.
So, hi everyone. First of all, welcome to this webinar and Happy New Year. So,
Happy New Year.
yes, everyone. And I would like to thank TechBairn to giving me this great opportunity so that I can share with you all to all my learnings and give you a basic overview and roadmap to becoming a skilled and full stack web developer in 2022. So, I'll start by sharing the screen first. So, is it visible?
Yes, your screen is visible.
Okay. So, as the topic suggests, we are going to go over the roadmap to full stack web development. So, I'll start with my introduction here. So, my name is Rishav Pandey. I'm presently working as a software developer at Skuad. We are building here a global one platform where we manage the hiring, onboarding, platform, benefit, everything of our employees. So, apart from my profession as being a full stack web developer, I have a great passion of traveling, learning new things, getting new experiences, meeting new peoples, and a lot of things basically. So you can always connect me over LinkedIn. I have provided my user ID here. So today's objective in the webinar will be that we'll get to know about full stack web development, career growth in full stack web development, why to choose this stream, and the roadmap to become a web developer. So I believe most of you already know about this term, full stack web development. And I also believe that some of you might be working as a full stack web developer also. But I'll be going to make a ground level zero start for everyone. So full stack web development is a software profession where we, as a developer, we deal with creating both the front end and back end of a website. So for example, as a full stack web developer, our day-to-day activity will include creating the web pages, designing the web pages, making it responsive, making some API request, connecting our server to the backends, linking the database, making some CRUD based operation like create, read, update and delete, and at last deploying our code and all. So in the roadmap of web development which I have created, our first element will be basics of internet. So what is internet? We all have been using internet from a long time. But my personal opinion as a web developer is that we should be knowing how the internet works and what is the some cool magic happening behind somewhere in the cloud. For example, we click on the URL, we write some URL in the browser, some web page appears, we do the browsing stuffs and all, and then we shut down the computer. But ideally, we should know how the things are working beneath that. For example, what are DNS? What is the DNS mapping? What is the IP address? What do you mean by so how the IP address are mapped to any server? What are port numbers? How they work? When you click on the web page, how the web page is rendered on the browser, and so on. So once we have a basic understanding of internet, we should move to our first part, that is being a front-end developer. So the first step of becoming a full stack web developer will be creating a web page, obviously in the browser. So that will include to have a knowledge of HTML and CSS. So basically HTML, as most of us are already knowing, the full form HTML is hypertext markup language. So it is used to create a web page in some structured manner. We have some tags like heading tags, paragraph tags. We have some tags for listing. We use the tags to make a structure. A typical web page will consist of a header. Then we'll have a sidebar. Then we can have a footer. Then there should be some section. So this is a typical view of a web page, which we overall see every time when we operate any of the websites. But then the web page will never be completed without using CSS. So using CSS and website in web page is just like, for example, when you are creating a web page, it will just look like this when we have a plain HTML and we don't have any CSS with this. But suppose you are adding the CSS. So this is how a web page looks with CSS. So you can visually visualize the difference between them. So CSS is just like styling the page. We have a lot of properties in the CSS, like we need to add the font color, we need to update the background, we need to even add the animations, we need to perform some visualization effect. Everything can be done using CSS. But this is not over in creating a web page. So once we are done with HTML and CSS, in the real world scenarios, there can be always the requirement that we need to make some, so the pages will always be interactive. For example, when you are clicking on the button of any web page, the sum of the events should occur. When you are filling the form, visually you see there some of the event should be fired visually. So for that, we'll need a programming language in front end side. So JavaScript, it is one of the most popular programming languages used nowadays. So specifically in web development. So once we have learned HTML and CSS, like I told earlier, we'll need to make page more interactive. For example, we need to perform some action on the button click. Some events should be fired. We might need to do some DOM manipulation. Like you can be provided with the web page where you are assigned a task to create a form. Some native validation should be necessary so that wrong data can't be filled as a user. So all these business logic things should be required by done using JavaScript. Suppose you need to integrate your front end application with your backend. So in that case, you need to make some SHR request, that is XML HTTP request. For that, for nowadays we use some of the inbuilt JavaScript APIs like fetch, or in case we are using the library, then we use Axios. So all this JavaScript provides us a lot of APIs for a lot of manipulation. Suppose you need to run a timer on the web page. In that case, we are having a few inbuilt APIs provided by the JavaScript through browser that are set timeout, set interval, and so on. So at this stage, you will be able to create a fully functional web page. But then we are still not ready for the production level, creating the web page which are production level. So once we are done with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, my personal recommendation is we need to know about the dev tool, browser-based dev tool. So this is one of the most important tool. As a web developer, I personally believe everyone should know. So these built-in web tools are provided specifically for us developers, so that we can inspect for the elements, we can debug our code, we can, for example, do some real-time testing. There are a lot of features provided in a dev tool. For example, you are creating a web page and you need to make a few API calls, and suddenly you integrated the code, you added the APIs call, you made the get request or post request, what is required there, but it's failing. So now then you need to debug that thing. So for this, you need to know the dev tool where you can inspect the elements. You can even go to and check for all the failing API requests. You can check for cookies associated for that websites. Basically, it's a kind of tool which you use for testing and making your application more robust. And so once we are completed with dev tool, then we move to version control system. So it's same like a time machine in our development process. For example, there can be scenarios that while we are making a code, we are writing the code, we need to make the change, or suppose we made the change 1 week later, 1 week ago, and then we need to track the changes what we made. So in that case, if we are using a plain editor, it can't be possible anywhere. So in that, for that purpose specifically, we are having version control system. Most of you all already know about Git, and then we have a website which perform this operation, that is GitHub and, for example, GitLab. So in this, what we are having is all the single changes, no matter the change you are making is of a single line or a whole file you are creating, every changes are tracked here. Suppose we are working in a team and multiple people are collaborating on the same project. So in that case, version control system is very helpful for us. We all can track all other changes. We can see when the code was failing. There can be scenario that suddenly on Friday our code was working and on Monday something break. So we can always go back to the code, the version of the code that was 2 days earlier. We can check for the possible errors, for possible scenarios. So everything, so all the management, so everything is done using version control system. So once we are done with version control system, then we move to libraries and frameworks. So this is where so everything gets interesting. We already have heard about some of the fascinating tech keywords like React.js, Angular, jQuery. So basically, libraries are something that are a collection of functions. For example, we'll go to a real world example here. We have some plain APIs provided by JavaScript. Suppose we need to do a DOM manipulation. We write a code that is document.get element by id. We write the id name and then we do any further operation. But in case we need to perform this operation using Java jQuery, so jQuery has provided us inbuilt APIs. We do not need to write all these big names, document.get_element_by id. You will just call a function. In that you will write hash, then you will write the name of the id, and that jQuery will automatically check that uh, for all the further operation, and it will perform those things. So other than that, then we have frameworks. So once we are done with libraries, then for example, suppose we need to create a functions, or in case if we go to JavaScript, most of you already know about there are multiple versions of JavaScript. Like currently we are using most popular and stable version, that is ES6. So earlier there were a lot, we were not having a lot of APIs in creating the arrays under JavaScript. Like we were not having sort function, inbuilt map function, inbuilt filter function. So all these APIs were not provided in ES6, but already then we were having the libraries which which were having the collection of these inbuilt functions which we were using nowadays. So other than that, libraries have more purpose. For example, now you need to create some of the sophisticated web pages. Like for example, we need to create some of the complex problem we need to solve. So this is very easily achievable by using the libraries and framework. We do not have to rewrite or rework every time, and we do not need to write same logics every time. Like when we deploy our code, we generally minify our JavaScript codes. So what is the benefit of minifying the code? Earlier, when we are writing the code, we give the naming convention as per our learning. For example, we are naming the function which consists of 8 or 10 characters, but that is not very good and optimal in a production level code, because ultimately the size of the file will increase. It will increase the load on the page and all. So what the minifier do? It will minify your code. So everything will be there, but unnecessary characteristic, that text and that all, everything will be removed. So that all thing you never need to do it manually when you are using libraries. These libraries will take care of everything. For example, we have some bundler tools in the libraries. What that will do is it will bundle your file, it will optimize the code, it will remove all the unnecessary things. You do not need to take care of this manually. So that is the reason, even if we are knowing HTML, CSS and JavaScript as a core level, we generally use libraries in the companies, because we do not have a time there that we need, or we create everything from scratch. So it's your preference. You can choose for any of the libraries or framework. So basically libraries and framework are of two types. One is UI based library and another one is JavaScript based. So in UI based libraries, we have a lot of CSS libraries on frameworks like Bootstrap, Material UI. So if you take the example of CSS, suppose you are assigned a task to create a page where you need to create a grid. So the ideal approach will be that you will be creating a new class that will consist of few of the CSS properties. For example, display flex, flex direction, column, row, whatever as the requirement. Then you need to add more CSS properties, like you need to define the width and all, whatever as per the requirement. But suppose you are using Bootstrap as a library in CSS, you will just need to use a predefined classes, that is .row, then we have .col, and in call also we have a lot of properties, like we can use call1, call2, call3 as per the grid requirement which we are having. So this is how using the libraries and framework is our work, and we do not need to perform those complex operation every time. So that become redundant. And as a developer or as a mainly computer science engineer, there is a philosophy, methodology we use, that is dry, do not repeat yourself. So these libraries and frameworks help us to prevent these things. And then we have a lot of tools for checking and do some strict type checking also. These all are directly provided in frameworks and libraries. So this thing is completely and now ultimately in market there are a lot of libraries. So it depends that whichever you want to use. All the libraries have their own pros and cons. You can go for Material UI, then you can go for Bootstrap, then we have Tailwind, then we have Bulma CSS. There are a lot of libraries. Then and relatively in JavaScript we are having React.js, Angular, Vue. But as per the trend, I'll recommend you all that you all start with React.js only, because as a library we have a lot of independency in React.js. Since it's not a framework, we are independent to integrate and use any of the independent libraries we can use in library in React.js. For example, you want to do some state management operation, you can use Apollo client side. Either you can go for Redux, then you can even go for the native React based state management tool, whatever you want. But in Angular, if we compare to Angular and React.js, Angular has some predefined rule set defined for you. You can't like go beyond that thing. If you are using a framework, like you are bounded by some of the rules, but in libraries you are not bounded like this. So that's the main reason that we are using here. So as per my opinion, I'll suggest that you all can go for React.js as a JavaScript libraries. And then there is a lot of more thing to learn in React.js. Like we can even keep a whole seminar on React.js specifically. So there's that much to learn. So after that, once we are over libraries and framework, then we move to testing. So this is not a very necessary step in becoming a full stack developer, but personally I'll recommend you all, because suppose as a developer you will always wish that your application is very robust, it never fails, it is always meeting up the requirement. So for that we do some testing. So that testing includes writing some of the test cases, then writing unit test case. For example, you created a function. We will take example of creating a function that is multiply by 2. So the intended behavior of that function will be you will pass a number to the function as argument, and that should multiply that passed argument by 2, and it should return the new computed value. So when we write the unit testing, then we will ensure that this function is working for all kind of numbers. It should never fail. So this is the behavior. So this is the expectation when we write test case and so on. And other than that, then we have some more advanced level of test cases, like you are clicking on the button, then the expected behavior is that some pop-up should open. Then you write the assertion in the test cases that when clicking on that particular button, this pop-up should open. So this all behavior you write there. So basically you do the testing so that you are ensuring that your application is robust and it is meeting all the expectation. It is not failing in any of the scenarios. So in this testing, I'll never recommend you all that you need to deep dive down in this particular field, but I'll particularly and personally suggest you all that everyone should have basic level of knowledge that how testing is done. That is very helpful, because ultimately when you are working for some production level application in any company, you will need to implement that thing. So once
I think you are mute, Rishav.
oh wait, so from where it's mute?
From just now, it's muted. I think from the space bar button or any shortcut key, it's get muted.
Okay, anyway, so let me resume with testing only again. So once we are completed with libraries and framework, we will deep dive down into testing. So like I earlier told that we are not going to
Again,
Hello, again it is muted.
this is happening.
I think there is some shortcut key that
No, it should not work.
uh, Vidhi,
Yes.
make him the host.
Yes, just 1 minute.
Again, you are muted.
Wait. So maybe you can change the host. In that case, it should not work.
Yes, Vidhi.
I've done it. Can you check once again?
Hmm, I believe that is not there.
Okay.
Okay, anyway, let's continue. So once we are done with testing, then at this stage we can say that we have completed almost everything to become a front-end developer. So in this, will be integrating. We'll need to know about integrating the APIs to connect the uh, backend servers and all to our front end. So now once we are done with front end development, we'll move to backend development. So before moving to backend, I'll recommend we should learn some Linux fundamentals and CLI. So, so it's just like earlier we were giving the instructions to our computer using graphical interface. When we needed to open any folder, we clicked on that particular folder, then that particular folder opened, then we double click on any of the file, and the relative that software which is intended to open that particular kind of file, it will open that thing. But now everything will be done using some of the command. So in this particular scenario, my personal opinion will be that we should know about the basics of commands, like we should know how to navigate to the path using the command. For example, if you want to move to any particular path, you will use cd and then you will write the location of that particular file. If you want to open any of the file, you will write the command of the particular software associated to open that thing. For example, you need to open a web page using Google Chrome. Then you will write Google-Chrome, then you will put space, then you will write the path of that file along with the extension, and then you will click enter, and that will open the Google Chrome. So now the thing is why we need to run CLI. So this is very important when we are using when we are working as a backend developer. Our day-to-day activity will be, we need to create the servers, we need to make some HTTP, we need to create some HTTP servers. Might be we need to run some headless browser in our server. So headless browser are basically a same browser that we see uh, in a graphical interface, but this runs on inside the terminal so that we can do some multiple operation. In case of you are working as a DevOps guy, you will need to know it will be very essential for you to learn about these commands and all. So everything as a DevOps you will need to do using command. You need to run some of the CI/CD pipelines. You need to make some of the deployments. You need to run the testing and all. Everything for that, it will be very necessary for you all to have some knowledge of these commands. And personally, I'll say when you have some experience using command line interface, it will make your development and writing program, it will make everything very easy for you. So once you are done with the fundamental and you know about what is command line interface, then we'll move to the backend part. So starting with backend, we'll need a programming language. So there are a variety of programming language we can opt for. For example, we have Node.js, then we have Python, we can go for Ruby, we have Java. Uh, Multiple options are there, but my personal opinion will be we'll move to Node.js, because Node.js is nothing. It's a server-side uses of JavaScript, where we are provided with an engine that works in a instead of browser on our local machine, and all the JavaScript APIs and all the JavaScript commands are available there. So since already we know a lot about JavaScript, Node.js will be very easy to learn. So in that case, what we'll do is, uh, once we picked our programming language, we'll learn creating HTTP server, then we learn creating APIs, then we learn some of the linking the databases, making CRUD operation, and might be we'll need to run some of the jobs internally. For example, uh, suppose you need to write a script, and that is intended to run after some interval every time in the server. So for all that kind of things, this all everything is done in backend only. So once we are done with a programming language, we'll need a data. So we already know that everything in computer science is done through data. We need some sort of a system or management to manage our data. So eventually, database is a collection of data in some sort of manner. That collection should be in a structured way, in a non-structured way. So mainly, so in that case, we'll need to know about the basics of database. We'll have to choose any of the database we need to. We can go for SQL based database. Then in that particular scenario, what we need to learn is we need to learn about how to add the new data in the database. Then we also need to modify the data. We need to then need to be able to perform some of the operations inside the database. Then there can be sensitive data we need to store in the database. For example, we need to store some passwords. Then in that case, we need to know that how we need to encrypt the content and save in the database. Then further, we also need to learn that how to protect ourselves from some of the attacks we generally get. For example, one of the most popular attack I remember is SQL injection. So all this kind of prevention, so everything whatever you need to know to play with the database, basically everything is covered here. So once we are done with database, then so in database, what the more thing you will include is, suppose you are creating an API, you will get the response from the front end. You will perform some of the operation, then accordingly you will make the changes in the database. You will return some of the output as per the expected behavior. So everything will be covered here. So once we have covered database, so at this point, I'll basically say that now we can completely create a full-fledged application, which can run from front end to back end. It can perform a lot of operation, any kind of behavior, whatever we can see in a day-to-day activity, or whatever we serve on the website. Everything can be done using all the things we are seeing here in this current roadmap. But now we need to make everything live. So once we have created the application, it should be made live somewhere so that it can be used by our dedicated user. So in this case, we need to learn about basics of deployment. For example, how we need to link our domains to the server, how we need to make some of the DNS entry to that particular IP address wherever we have deployed our server. So this will include in deployment. Then we need to learn about CI/CD, that is continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what does that mean is, like earlier mentioned, you need to know about testing. So what we do is we create some pipelines. In that we run the test. For example, you created an application and then you have written the test cases. So what this CI/CD pipeline will do, that it will run those test cases automatically, and it will verify that whether all the test cases have been passed or not. So in case suppose any of the test case fails, so in that scenario, you will never want that failed case should be deployed and it should be served to our end user. Then in that case, deployment will broke. So all these things will be handled in CI/CD pipeline. Then we need to suppose run some of the internal tools. Whenever like some deployment is done, then some of the scripts should run, some of the jobs should be performed. So everything will be considered in this thing. And so this will be basically a part of a DevOps person. But at basics, what I'll recommend personally to you all is, you all should know about using some of the very commonly used tools, like that is Netlify, Vercel. So what they do there is that there you can simply host and publish your website without a lot of pain. And then we have, if you are using GitHub, then we have GitHub pages also. There also we can publish and deploy all our changes, and we can make it live with the URL provided. If you want to link our custom domain, then that linking can be done by making those DNS entry. linking the IP address and all. So once we are done with development, then we can completely say that we have learned everything that is required to become a full stack web developer. So now it comes about practicing more and more, working on some new more problem statements, creating some more sophisticated things. And so now once you have gone through all of the uh, components, we basically saw this in roadmap. We can basically assume that now we have completed everything that is required to become a full stack web developer. So personally, this is the roadmap we required. So to complete as a so this is the roadmap that will be basically required. You need to cover all the components which you can see on the screen. So like I earlier told that some of the components which is there, like version control system, testing, CI/CD, this Linux fundamental, these are not very important, but ultimately you will need that when you are working on the some of the tools. But eventually when you are creating your own project, you can skip this thing also, but ultimately you will be needing all this thing. So by now we can see that this is the roadmap, and hence then we can ensure that using this of the components we created on the roadmap we can use, and we'll be able to create a full stack web application required. We can fulfill any of the requirement given using these tools and components we need to learn. So this was the roadmap. So basically what I do is now we can, once we have gone through the roadmap, we can go for the session of Q&A, and then there we can cover for all the queries or any of the issues you might be having.
If any one of you have any question, you can ask in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
Someone is asking in the chat box, please say your LinkedIn ID once.
So we have a question about the open source.
Okay,
If you
so
could
great.
tell us about that.
So basically, what is open source? This is one of the very hot topic, like every time we have been seeing. So open source is just like in the open source community. What we basically do is there is some project in which the code base is never closed to that particular community which are working that. It is completely open source. Open source. It is available for everyone. We can go for any of the project which is open source. We can check for the code base. We can see all the business logic. It's not like that I have created some project, I have kept it secret, only the team member which are allowed to work on that project are having that access. It's not like that. So in this open source, what we basically do is we have a project, all the code base, everything is live and everything is open for everyone. And every individual, no matter from where they belong, whether they are the part of that organization or not, they are free to contribute there. They are free to give their suggestions. They are even free to use that particular application. For example, there are a lot of libraries nowadays which are completely open source. Even the React.js, that is completely open source. So there is no foundation. You never need a license to use that. But suppose you are using any of the project which is not open source by any organization. For example, we take the reference of Windows operating system. So ideally there is a Linux operating system. So all the code base and everything that is open source in GitHub. You can always go, you can always check out to the code base that how Linux has been created, and you can check for the, even if you want to contribute there, you can contribute that, and you can go and check for the learnings. But in case of the codes that has been used to create the operating system, that is Windows. We do not have, that is not open source. So in that case, what will happen is you can never contribute, you can never know about that. That is closed, and it is means open for only the definite number of people. They are associated to that particular organization. But in open source, what we have, everything is open to us. Whatever we need to learn, suppose any of the logics you need, like for example, we can take some real world example here. There is a library that is Axios, so that is used to make some HTTP request using front end. So there can be a query or something in your mind that you can think, so like why not we know that how Axios is working beneath. So in that case, you will want to see the code base, how that is working, so that you can have some new learning. Maybe you can be inspired by this and inspired by that, and you can create your own new library in that case. So what you will do is you will simply search for the that repository access in the GitHub or wherever they have provided. You will go through the code base, you will see the logics, that how something has been done, and maybe after that inspiration you can create your own library also. Other than that, suppose there are some utility based libraries like lambda js and all. So in that case, what happens is, suppose we need to contribute in those code base, we need to add some contribution. Then what we can do is we can make some merge request in terms of GitHub and all. We can contribute there, we can enhance the application. So eventually it's like that. In closed source community, there is only some definite number of people, they have their own knowledge and all, and they are implementing there. But in open source, what is happening, that everyone from everywhere around the world, they are open to contribute, they are open to give their learnings. And in this case, basically, like every time you might have heard that we grow by learning together. So what happens is that we have a lot of new minds, everyone can contribute. In that case, new ideas can come over that. So that is the reason basically open source has been promoted recently from a long time, like 3 or 4 years we can say. So that is all about open source. Okay, so then there is one question: is there any off-campus recruitment or Skuad? So yes, ideally we have mainly off-campus recruitment only. We never go for in-campus recruitment in our organization. So the main purpose or some of the main criteria which we see in our organization has never been your degrees, your certification and all. We always seek for the talents, no matter you are in first year or second year. If you think that you are capable enough to work on some real project, you can make you really think that you can make some differences by using your skill set, you are always welcome. Okay, so what kind of projects are demanded by companies coming for recruitment? So see, this is one of the very interesting question. So basically, the problem statement so what I will suggest to you all as a beginner is that my personal opinion will be, once you have gone through all the tech stack which I mentioned, for example, you learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, some of the libraries and frameworks you worked. But then I'll personally recommend is you should start creating some real world example, because until and unless you haven't jumped yourself in that area, you will never experience the real problem. For example, what you can do is, once you have a good understanding of these 3 languages, then what you can do is you can opt for some of the open source APIs which are being provided in GitHub and all. You can use the APIs from there, you can link the APIs in your application, you can play with that. Then you can further, even if you want to and more, what I can do is you can take the reference. For example, you can create the clone of the real world applications which are available here. For example, you can try to clone Instagram, and then you can create your own version of Instagram. It's not about that you have to create the perfection there, it's about your learning. So even if you haven't achieved that Instagram clone properly, but then again you are very good because you tried your best, you might have implemented a lot of feature that is already, and who knows, maybe you can come up with a better application than Instagram. So it's all about, until and unless you are not trying it, we can never know that thing. So personally, what I will always recommend is any of the libraries, or see, any of the topics you are learning. So suppose you are learning how to run the for loop in JavaScript. So what I'll personally recommend is go over the application that, and apply your own logic, that why not I use some different way in and implement this for loop. If there is a syntax, and if you need to use switch case and all, so these are very basic commands and tags we are in the programming language. So this way you can go. Suppose you have you just learned, you went some tutorial and you learn about integrating the API. So what I'll recommend is go over the Google, search for all the available APIs, and like for example, you can get some APIs which will give you the list of countries. So what you do is you create an application which will display the list of countries. So if more advanced you want to do, then what you do is you make somewhat interactive, like you make a structure of a card. In that you will display everything. Okay, so that kind of approach you can follow. And so my personal opinion, what always will be that follow a practical based approach. So whatever you are learning, practice that, create application, no matter how bad you are creating, but create that. It's not like just you learn and throw away. So like you were asking, what is the difference between web development and full stack development? See, eventually, so these are some ambiguities term we are using here. Web development means if what we are developing in web, that is web development, like you are creating the web pages, website and all. But in full stack, what is happening, that you are knowing more than creating the website, and you are knowing that how the website is, you are knowing that how the website is working, how the development deployment is done in the website. You are learning more than creating only developing the pages. So in full stack, what you will do is you will not just be limited about creating the web pages and all. And suppose it's not about only full stack web development. Nowadays there has been trend of creating the native applications using React Native and all. So what we are doing is we are writing the code of Flutter also. A lot of you might have heard. So in that, what we are doing is you are writing a single code base, and that is creating a mobile based application. It is running on Android, it is running on iOS. So full stack development will include this also. But when we are adding the word web, then that will be restricted to only browser and everything related and around to that. So like you're asking, for full stack development, which section should be more strong? Eventually everything should be strong enough so that you can work in you can solve the real world exam problems in that term. So for example, like suppose all of you have started full stack, but most of you will see that you are more inclined in creating some beautiful designs. You have some more interest in giving the better UX to the user, adding greater UI. So in that case, what I'll personally recommend is you should stick to front end development also only. So, but in some of you might have interest with playing with data, creating some of the complex logics, playing with database, doing some operations. For example, if I am sending you my username and password from front end, you feel very fascinating by encrypting that and storing somewhere. It's just like you feel that you are doing something very great and all. Everything is dependent on you. So in that case, you can opt for backend also. It's not that everything you need to learn. What I basically meant to say in full stack is you should have a. It's like that jack of all and master of few. You will never need to know in-depth knowledge for every of the components that I mentioned earlier in that roadmap, but some of the component in that you should have in-depth knowledge. So you can opt for front-end development. You can either be back-end guy, leave it everything. Suppose when you started some of the deployment stuff and you found that interesting, then become a DevOps engineer. So ultimately, when you become a full stack developer, you have a lot of areas and fields open for you. Now it's personal opinion and choice. whatever you are liking to do, and you are free to do. But never restrict yourself in learning. Learn as much as you can. So that is the way I'll tell.
Is there any more question?
Sir, can you please share your LinkedIn ID so people can connect with you?
You can search for my name, Rishav Pandey. I will be found at, I guess, top result only. So still I will share here.
Yes, someone is asking, is there any attendance? Yes, there will be attendance. So wait for some time. I think the question is over.
It's if a person is not from coding background, which one is to do done. So this just start following the roadmap. Start with basic of internet. Learn how internet works. Learn some interesting facts about internet, and then go with HTML. What I'll say is, when you are starting with HTML and CSS, you are going to see the results very early. So in that case, you will even get motivated also. Like it will feel like you started learning something today, and day after tomorrow you are able to get the output also. You will write few of the tags. For example, like suppose we are removing that accessibility, semantic tags, everything for now. So what you will do is, you will write a simple h1 tag and you will write your name, and when you will save and you will open that file in a browser, you will see that your browser, your name is there on that page. So suddenly you will also feel like you created a web page which consists of your name. So that is the start. So when you are starting with HTML and CSS, that becomes very easy, and easily you will get the output in very less time. But in terms of backend development, a lot of dependencies are there. You need to learn a lot of things. So in that case, that will take some time. So how much time is needed for becoming a full stack developer? See, this basically depends on the pace what you are following. We can never define that when you are working for this particular span of time, then you will become a full stack developer. Even if you are working for 5 years, you can never claim that you can create everything. So if no, so in this technology or current era, every time everything means, after every some period of time, there will be new libraries, there will be new frameworks you need to learn, and you need to make yourself up to date. But on an average, if you ask personally, what I'll recommend or I'll say suggest is that if you start from basics, if you have interest, you know the basics of coding, like you have done some programming on C or C++. So ideally 2 or 3 months will be very enough. If you, but in that case, you need to plan that 3 month in future. Everything you need to plan that 3 month, that after how much that particular day of time you are going to cover HTML. So what is the extent of career for full stack developer? So what I'll tell you, that currently full stack development is one of the very hot area in IT industries. I can personally guarantee you that no matter you are a beginner, if you have decent knowledge of full stack development, I can personally guarantee you that you can land a job and of around 8 to 10 LPA. That personal guarantee I can give you. Even if you are a fresher, it will never matter. So for that, what I'll suggest you, create a solid resume. In that resume, that portfolio you need to create. So what in that also, what I'll suggest, have your own website. It is not necessary that you buy a domain name at your for your name and do the hosting and all. It will work even if you are using any of the services or softwares like Netlify, Versal, or GitHub Pages. No one is going to hire you just because you have your own domain. They are going to hire you because they fit. They personally feel that you are fit for that role. So what you do is learn the technologies, create some projects, search for real world project. You can easily find everywhere in the GitLab, in the GitHub. You can find in Google also. If you search, you can find. So create a solid portfolio. Create your own website where clearly indicate that you know this much thing. Showcase your projects and then apply for companies. And I am pretty much confident that in one or two attempt only you will land a job, and it will be easily more than 8 to 10 LPA. You never have to wait for your campus placement, where you all are being provided this service based companies offers this bond and all. Never restrict yourself. So but in that case you will have to uh, uh, move out of your comfort zone and work really hard, but eventually that will be worth. So and will be the certificate beneficial. So see, if any kind of certificate you are talking about, so any of the hiring manager, whoever is taking your interview, they are not a blind enough that if you display them some of the certificates, then you are going to hire. But eventually, personally, I will say that it will help you in making yourself distinct and different in compared to others which are not having certificate. But you can't ensure, or no one can ensure you that if you have got a certificate then you will be hired. Certification is just like you have means when you are doing a certification from any of the organization, it's that you have been given a proof that some of the things were provided there, you learned that thing, and so that's the proof that you learned that thing. But how much you learned, were you really able to implement your learning in some real world problem, that completely depends on you. But yes, certificate helps somehow, but I'll never say that it will uh, like help you in hiring, but it will help you for sure.
In 15 to 20 minutes, we will end the session. So, I think there is no more question. Vidhi,
Yes, sir.
yes, you can end the session.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rishav, sir, for taking your time out from your busy schedule to be our guest speaker at our webinar. Your presence and nice words help magnify our cause in the best possible way. All thanks to your enlightening words that inspired so many of us today. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Have a great future, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.